Tonight I'm going to be talking about the second half of Chapter 3 of Dr. Bernard Jensen's book, A Guide to Better Bowel Health. Tonight we're talking about some specific bowel disturbances and or inflammatory diseases, one of which is colitis. He starts off with that, and colitis is an irritable bowel condition that's often associated with psychological distress. So a lot of clients that I've had with problems, including irritable bowel syndrome, where there's overstimulation resulting in about 15 to 20 bowel movements a day, anything that you're getting like that is going to have to do with psychological stress. When your body is in a stress mode, your adrenals, which are two little sacs that sit on top of your kidneys, are going to push out adrenaline. This results in the pancreas and the liver being stimulated, and the liver starts squirting out bile to react to the other bodily fluid stimulants that are being filtered through the liver. That results in runny bowel movements. And so anytime you get nervous, you need to, if you are having any of these symptoms, you have to find a way to calm down that psychological stress. He goes on to talk about, what can change in diet and a few other things, but really with colitis, which can result in diverticulitis because it's a chronic inflammation. And the only way, or one of the primary ways that that's going to get better, is to calm down the psychological disturbance, the nervous tension, stress in our lives. When they talk about stress being a killer, we just think that our bodies can handle all of the stress that we put on it without any acknowledgement of it. It's one thing to have stress and let it go. It's another thing if stress continues to pile on your body, and that's going to result in some bowel disturbances. So keep that in mind. Another thing that it talks about here is a stricture. And in here I found it very interesting. A stricture is when a portion of the colon gets stretched out, and then there's a pocket for another portion of the colon, and then another very thin area where there's constriction. It's a stricture. Um, he talks about how some strictures are more severe than others. Strictures may be caused by a long-term flow of aberrant nerve impulses to a particular area of the colon. And it's interesting because he's mentioned that aberrant nerve impulses. If you've ever heard of anyone getting a limb chopped off in battle, they have aberrant pain, pain in the hand, the arm, the leg, whatever may have, the phantom pain. And this aberrant nerve impulse is there, there's no apparent reason that they can find other than psychological disturbances or stress that cause a consistent nerve impulse and pain response in a generalized area of nerves. And so, with our colon especially, there aren't a lot of nerves there. So if you're getting to a point where, in the small intestine, you're having a lot of pain, a lot of cramping, and the small intestine is going to be right in the center of your belly. When we talk about a tummy ache, that's most generally the small intestine because it's right dead center of the gut. If you're having a lot of those, it could be aberrant nerve impulses. That can be, often it's due to physical and emotional causes. And once those pathways are formulated, they're going to be a consistent way where whenever there's pain or stress or emotional disturbance, those nerve impulses are going to be shot through that channel, and it's going to result in pain and distress. He also talks about gas. He calls it flatulence. And he talks about how lifestyles, eating a highly processed, sugar-oriented, simple carbohydrate-oriented diet will increase gas because you get that bad bacteria in there that just start fermenting. If you've ever heard of or done any fermenting yourself, you know that oftentimes you have to burp the things that you're fermenting because they'll blow because that fermentation process, well, good and bad bacteria ferment. And so if you can reduce the number of processed foods and increase the number of raw foods that you get into your diet, then you're going to have a time when you're going to have more gas because you're shifting that diet and all of that fiber is going to move through. But if you can slowly over time shift away from processed foods and towards a raw diet, you're really going to improve not only your digestion, gas, uncomfortable things like that, but your overall health, your voltage, your well-being is going to increase and you're going to feel better. These things that we talk about in health, food, nutrients, minerals, healthy lifestyles, that's where your body wants to be. You don't have to fight it. You may have to fight your own mental bad habits that you've developed, but if you can exert a certain amount of control, and that's something not a lot of us have anymore, is control over our actions. If you can fight nerve impulses, be they stress or stressing out over something to the extent that you give yourself an irritable bowel, or stressing so much that you're overeating, you can really, if you can control those impulses, you can start to improve your health immensely. So that's something to consider, impulse control. He goes on to talk about friendly bacteria and bad bacteria. I've heard a lot of numbers thrown around. In here, he uses a percentage by Dr. Kellogg that correct bacterial balance for a healthy bowel is about 85% friendly lactobacillus bacteria and 15% unfriendly. I hope I said that right, lactobacillus. I don't know if anyone out there is an expert in friendly bacteria. Let me know if I'm mispronouncing it. He also goes on to talk about Bulgaria, and if you've been to the store lately, you might have seen some Bulgarian yogurt. They've got that here in the Tri-Cities at Yolks, and they probably have it at a health food store near you, but it comes in like an applesauce shaped jar, and that is a specific style of yogurt, and the Bulgarians live far into their late 90s, early hundreds. So if you want to improve longevity, you need to improve the content of the bacteria in your gut. And that's no surprise. If you look at healthy, rich soil, just like a healthy, rich human, you need lots of good microorganisms. And there's actually things called HSOs that you can get from local farmers that they put on the soil. And I personally put it in my water to help with friendly bacteria and getting my intestines to be rich soil for growth for friendly bacteria. You can't grow friendly bacteria if you've got a unfriendly environment in your gut. So keep that in mind also. He goes on to talk about ulcerations, bowel spasms. And as far as an ulceration, that's usually a cut or a fissure inside of the bowel that can happen from very hard fecal matter. It can be due to stress, toxins settling in on a specific area of weakness, and they start to ulcerate that area. So, colon hydrotherapy is a great way to wash the contents of your colon out. Bowel spasms, he goes on to talk about if there's a particular area, like I talked about with the stricture, but if the whole area of the bowel gets stretched out, which happens very often. If you ever have pencil thin stools or any kind of very small bowels, you most likely have an area where there's a stretched out portion of the bowel that results in a bowel spasm. Adhesions of the colon are caused by inflammation and irritation of the bowel wall. You've got a mucosal lining there in the bowels, and if you start to get too many toxins, you'll start to notice that you're a very mucousy type person. Like you get that voice rattle, or you're always clearing your throat, things like that. I know that happens to me often. So something to keep in mind, if your body continues to fill with that mucus because you've got toxins in the bowel, then you're going to get throat mucus. So that's something that's real fun. He goes on to talk about bowel parasites, and it's estimated that 200 million people are infected with intestinal invaders. There's some great products. One that I'm using right now is from Sunrider, and it is Slim Caps. Let's see if I can get that close enough there. That is a product by Sunrider, a great company, and it is a bowel, liver, and parasite cleanse. So each type of parasite cleanse, it depends on the particular parasite. For me, that parasite is Candida. It's bacteria / parasite I'm always going to have to battle. I did a lot of antibiotics when I was a kid, a lot of sugar, into my early adult and 20s when I wasn't eating very well. And so it's just something that you slowly have to unwind from. He talks about prolapsed bowels. I'm not going to go into much detail there. If you have or believe that you may have a prolapsed bowel, you've got to get muscle tonality back, and that's kind of difficult to do, so I would suggest a consultation with a professional. Colon cancer is the second leading cause of death in the U.S., and that's a pretty high number considering how many people die of health-based diseases in the U.S. every year. So if you don't think your colon is important, try living without it. That will either result in a bowel, like a colostomy bag, which is not very fun, or, as your colon continues to putrefy and gets run down, it's usually a preliminary cancer like breast or lung cancer, and then it will be found that there was actually an issue in the colon. So get your colon clean and keep it clean. That's about it from here. I kind of went on in length because this chapter had a lot of interesting subjects. If you have any more questions, please refer to our website or call us. Have a great night.